The Trump administration continues to push forward with its controversial immigration policies, using the Alien Enemies Act to deport nearly 300 individuals it claims are members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, despite a federal judge's ruling temporarily blocking the use of the act for such deportations. Administration officials remain firm in their stance, touting the operation as a major victory in their ongoing crackdown on illegal immigration and organized crime. The deportation announcement and legal challenges on Sunday. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced that hundreds of immigrants had been deported under the wartime era Alien Enemies Act, a rarely invoked law dating back to 1798. According to Leavitt, these individuals were sent to El Salvador, where they were placed in custody instead of remaining free in American communities. The president invoked this authority to deport nearly 300 of them, who are now in El Salvador, where they will be behind bars where they belong rather than roaming freely in American communities, Leavitt stated during an interview on Fox News, Sunday Morning Futures. However, the specifics of how the government determined the gang affiliations of the deportees remain unclear. The administration has not disclosed whether these individuals were provided with court hearings or immigration hearings, given that the Alien Enemies Act allows for deportation without trial in times of war. A judge issued a temporary restraining order on Saturday, instructing that any deportation flights in transit should return to the U.S. if they carried individuals subject to President Trump's proclamation. However, the ruling did not apply to those who had already landed in a foreign country prior to the court order, or those being deported for other reasons unrelated to Trump's directive. The government's response and uncertainty over compliance. In a court filing on Sunday afternoon, the administration acknowledged that some individuals had already been removed from U.S. territory before the judge's order was issued. However, whether those individuals had arrived in El Salvador before the ruling remains uncertain. Leavitt denied allegations that the White House defied the court order, arguing that the ruling was issued after the deportations had already occurred. This written order and the administration's actions do not conflict, Leavitt stated. Moreover, as the Supreme Court has repeatedly made clear, federal courts generally have no jurisdiction over the president's conduct of foreign affairs. His authorities under the Alien Enemies Act and his core Article 2 powers to remove foreign alien terrorists from U.S. soil and repel the declared invasion. Two senior administration officials told NBC News that they anticipate the legal battle over the Alien Enemies Act to reach the Supreme Court, where they believe Trump's use of the law will ultimately be upheld. The lawsuit against the Trump administration, ahead of Trump's proclamation, the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and Democracy Forward filed a lawsuit challenging the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act. The lawsuit initially aimed to prevent the deportation of 5 Venezuelan men, but was later expanded to cover all non-U.S. citizens in custody who were subject to the proclamation. Federal Judge James Boasberg, the Chief Judge of the D.C. District Court, issued a temporary restraining order, stating that any flights carrying these individuals must return to the U.S. Any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air needs to be returned to the United States, Boasberg declared. Those people need to be returned to the United States. Despite the ruling, reports emerged that at least one flight landed in El Salvador, prompting concerns over whether the administration had knowingly violated the court order. International reactions and political ramifications. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele took to social media to confirm that 238 members of Tren de Aragua had arrived in the country, along with 23 MS-13 members deported from the US. Bukele appeared to mock the judge's ruling by posting a headline about the order, with the caption, "Oopsie, too late," accompanied by a laughing emoji. Trump administration officials praised Bukele's cooperation, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio thanking the Salvadoran president for his willingness to imprison these individuals. "Hundreds of violent criminals were sent out of our country," Rubio stated. He further emphasized the administration's commitment to removing individuals affiliated with Tren de Aragua, a gang the administration has designated as a terrorist organization. Surrounding the deportations has reignited debates over the scope of presidential power, the separation of powers, and the role of the judiciary in checking executive authority. Stephen Gillers, a law professor at New York University, warned that if the administration is allowed to defy court orders with impunity, the country could face a constitutional crisis. Now that Congress has shown itself subservient to the wishes of the White House, the judiciary is the last check against the exercise of autocratic power in the president. Gillers stated, "The question before the country is whether the judges will use their contempt and other powers to resist the elimination of checks and balances in order to protect the rule of law. The path forward, legal battles and political fallouters, the legal challenges over Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act continue. All eyes will be on the federal courts and potentially the Supreme Court. If the High Court upholds the administration's interpretation of the act, it could set a precedent for future presidents to use the law to deport foreign nationals without due process during times of conflict." For Trump, this latest immigration controversy reinforces his tough-on-crime and strong border narrative ahead of the upcoming election cycle. However, critics argue that the administration's actions undermine the rule of law and pose a significant threat to civil liberties. The coming weeks will likely see heightened tensions as legal arguments unfold and political discourse intensifies. Whether Trump's actions will stand or be struck down remains to be seen, but the implications of this case could shape U.S. immigration policy and executive authority for years to come. In the meantime, the deported individuals remain in El Salvador, facing an uncertain fate under the custody of Salvadoran authorities. As debates rage on, their stories may become central to the broader conversation on immigration, human rights, and the limits of presidential power.